Now that you're all back in D.C., I'm sure, other than your bill, what's the talk like with Joe and his mental state?
Well, look, I mean, obviously, I'll start with the premise that none of us take any great joy in watching the President of the United States, the most, not just powerful, but most important position in the world, the leader of the free world, in that state, right? That is not something you want to see. I've got very strong disagreements, metaphorically and politically violent disagreements with the current president. But the fact that you watch him in that debilitated state, wandering off at the G7 summits and walking around the stage at Normandy and just, unable to put two sentences together. And then even in that pathetic conference with Joe Scarborough, a news conference or whatever interview, he couldn't even put a sentence together there to defend his competence. I mean, that's the problem. And he has the nuclear codes, and he's the commander-in-chief, and we're all just sitting back going, that can't be. I mean, that's why I filed the resolution, calling on the vice president to invoke the 25th Amendment. We can't do anything, right? I mean, only the vice president can.
Wow. I want to spend some time here on the SAVE Act. So this is the big policy topic of next week. Democrats whipping up votes against your SAVE Act. We don't have too much time, so I think we all identify the problem. The problem is it's possible for illegal aliens to be voting. How is that possible? Because I heard here from Stephen Miller, former senior advisor to Trump. Let me see here. Joe Biden is mass importing criminal migrants, giving them Social Security numbers, and handing out voter registration forms to migrants. How do illegal aliens have Social Security numbers?
Well, look, I mean, first of all, there's a whole cadre, system in place for people to be able to, provide Social Security numbers. There's a lot of, black market things going on. People steal American citizen Social Security numbers and use them. But importantly, when you dump 5 billion people into the United States and you expect them just to live, what are they going to do, right? I mean, that's going to happen. There's a whole, industry built up around propping up people here to be here illegally. So, of course, they're voting. And then, importantly, our own federal government are registering these people automatically through Medicaid, through forced DMV registrations under federal law. And, of course, they're registering them. And then they're saying, but they won't vote in federal elections. Don't worry about it. That's already against the law. But yet we have no systems in place to check it. That's the absurdity. You can't even make it up. Federal law has been interpreted to prohibit states from checking to see if you're a citizen, even though technically the law says you must be a citizen.
Listen, this idea that they won't vote because it's illegal is absurd. It's against the law for them to be here. What would stop them from voting illegally? Who cares? So my understanding, Congressman, is someone, let's say they go to get a driver's license or Medicaid, as you mentioned. They will get a federal form that says, here's your vote, here, fill this out to register to vote. Hey, are you a citizen? And it says yes or no. And if you say yes, there's no check on whether or not that's true, and you're registered to vote. Is that right?
Yeah, you just described it very well. That's exactly right. And it's not just through the DMV, but like I said, the Medicaid rolls and other things. And what you'll find is, like, take Arizona, for example. Arizona passed a law saying they wanted to make sure that only citizens vote in federal and state and local elections. That went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, no, sorry, you can't do that for federal elections because federal law preempts it. So they have two systems in Arizona, one system for checking state and local elections where they go through the whole system, and then another system for federal where they don't check citizenship. Literally, that's the current state of the law. Our bill would not only fix that, we would go one step further. We would require all states to do that on federal elections. We think that still respects federalism. This is federal elections, Congress, Senate, presidency. We need to be able to bind this country together at least under at least one simple notion that we can trust elections that only citizens are voting for federal candidates.
Okay. So we all agree on the problem that is bad and needs to be solved. So last time we chatted with you like a month ago or so about this. And again, this is being voted on next week. Is that the plan?
It's being voted on tomorrow. Tomorrow. We voted it out of Rules Committee yesterday, and it will be on the floor of the House tomorrow.
Oh, nice. Okay, party on. So I got to know from someone, Breitbart listener, conservative, we all agree, et cetera. And he said, well, hold on. I don't want to have to prove I am a citizen in order for me to vote. They felt that was an imposition, whether like a physical one or a financial one or just like an insulting one. that I have to now do something to go prove that I'm a citizen. So if this bill passes, what would someone have to do in order to register to vote legally?
All right. Well, first of all, let me just start with this premise. In about 2 minutes, I'm going to be driving around the 400,000 tombstones at Arlington National Cemetery. Those people either gave their last little measure of devotion or were willing to give it so that we could live in a free country. All we're asking is that people take an extra step, and it's a minor one at that, to ensure the integrity of our elections. So from my standpoint, that's your starting place. But now let's see, well, how much of a burden, right? None of us like TSA. None of us like all these burdens that get placed on us every day in our life. We want to keep it simple. So we drafted it to follow existing state laws primarily. So what would change? First of all, nothing would immediately change for people who are already registered. You'd be allowed to go vote. What we would require is for the next registrant, so if someone goes to register to vote tomorrow, like if this bill passed, then they would be forced to show up with a passport, a real ID that's already checking citizenship, or if the system doesn't have that, a driver's license, a photo ID, plus a copy of your birth certificate or your naturalization papers. And then there are other paths you can take. If you can't get a hold of your birth certificate, if you can't do those things. And in the future, we would require states to clean their rolls, to go back and make sure that there's a process for making sure that only citizens are registered. That's what we do. We try to make it minimally burdensome, but strong enough to ensure that only citizens vote. We think that is I don't want to say bare minimum, but a standard we should all applaud if you want integrity and belief in your system.
Okay, so if I'm already registered to vote where I live, I wouldn't have to do anything ever.
You would not, although the state would then go through and make efforts to confirm and clean up their rolls, and we would allow each state to make determinations for how best to do that. So take, for example, Virginia last year did an effort to do that. They check against federal databases and other stuff, and they found 1,500 non-citizens were registered. Texas did that a few years ago. We found 25,000 in the Texas system that were non-citizens. We would be requiring states to do that and providing more tools to clean the voter rolls. So it's possible that if your name and you're registered and something didn't match up right, it's possible they'd come back to you when you go to vote or register and they'd say, hey, we need to see a passport or see some form of verification that you're a citizen. And then we allow for provisional ballots and other mechanisms so that your vote will still count. So it should be minimally burdensome, but there is at least another layer of requirements you have to have some standard to ensure only citizens are voting.
Yep. Okay. So let's say if I don't move, I'm grandfathered in, I'm registered to vote, I'm good to go unless the state does something else. Okay. But if I move across town to a new jurisdiction or if I move to a different state, I would need to re-register to vote. So if this bill passes, I would need to go to the Tennessee voters, whatever, and they'd say, okay, we need to see a birth certificate. So I don't have my birth certificate. My mom has it. She can't find it. Okay. So I got to go I did this yesterday. Go to vitalcheck.com, I think is the website. And it's like $30 to get a birth certificate from my home state. I need to do that anyway. So
and by the way, this is assuming you don't have a passport. This is assuming you're not in the military with a military ID that validates your citizenship. That we've got some of those on file. That's also assuming you don't have that we allow states to create other mechanisms and to check against federal databases to ensure you're a citizen. We provide a number of different paths, but yes, proceed.
Yes. So my concern is that that is burdensome enough, Congressman, as easy as you've made it, going to vitalcheck.com, paying the $10 shipping, waiting the X number of days for it to arrive. That's enough of a burden. That's enough friction that many conservatives won't do it. And it would decrease the number of conservatives voting by more than the number of illegals it would prevent from voting. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I just disagree. Again, you go to the part about your requirement as a citizen, your basic civic duty to go vote. Let's just start with that. But beyond that, in terms of what you think the numbers and the impact would be, if you look at the bill, what we've done, we've created and allowed for systems to be put in place by states to check against existing databases and to find other means and mechanisms for ensuring citizenship. So again, you start with, you've got the system in place, and people can show up to vote. You go, okay, you just described it. You move, something changes, you get married, whatever it is, something that triggers. All right, you show back up to re-register. They go, okay, but you got to demonstrate your citizenship. Well, all right, what percentage of Americans have passports? Pretty good chunk, okay. What percentage of Americans have a real ID that already checks citizenship? Pretty good chunk. What percentage of Americans are military that already checks this? Pretty good chunk. What percentage of Americans would then show up and have a copy of the birth certificate or get the cheap version that you can get online pretty quickly? And by the way, it's like $2, $5, $10 in different states. Pretty cheap in most states. Provide that. Okay, you can't do that. All right, there are other mechanisms that we have in the bill to allow for checking that frankly matches up against what states already do. The point here is to ensure that there are ways to do that. We believe you can also create it so that by those systems you're checking against federal systems to ensure that these are citizens voting, and we have mechanisms for doing that and allow states the flexibility to figure it out.